I have to say thank you. I didn't know if Max was going to bring a gun, but he brought some good knowledge. Really nice meeting him, and I actually really like Max. So now I give you just under 90 minutes of Mr. Max Keiser and Mr. Alessio Rastani. We are talking about all things Bitcoin and all things everything. In fact, if you make it through the first hour, you'll hear a little bit about Max talk about the days when he worked for Payne Weber, when he was a stockbroker in New York, and he was selling stock during the day and partying at CBGB's at night. Jesus. Okay, I'm about to explode. So for now, I give you Mr. Max Keiser. Shall we do this, gentlemen?
Go for it. Got your timer right here, man.
Let's do this, Max. Let's do this, Alessio. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. With me today is Alessio Rastani, the Robin Hood of Wall Street, some say. He's known to the world first on BBC Live television for telling us that Goldman Sachs rules the world. Max, did you see that?
Seminal moment in television history. Alessio told the world the truth about Goldman Sachs, and the BBC was shocked.
It was awesome.
They were shocked. They looked around like, what? What's going on? Who let this guy in? Oh my God. Somebody call my lawyer, my accountant. It's all wrong. It's all good. It's all bad.
I love that one. You would have seen Alessio first. We had him on the show. It was an episode I called Money Never Sleeps. You guys get the reference to Wall Street? Yeah. That's before.
Yeah, really clever.
Before the second movie came out.
Right.
Really.
Thank you very much.
Wow.
Michael Douglas.
I know this is
Really
going to be a tough audience.
It's a good episode.
Thank you.
Of this show.
Of this
it's
show.
the Alessio show.
Oh, thank you.
Because he goes into the truth.
Thank you.
The truth.
Truth time out. And with us today is Mr. Max Keiser. Could you be of any doubt? He is an American broadcaster and filmmaker. He hosts Keiser Report.
We started?
Yeah, we started.
Okay. All right, great.
You host Keiser Report, which is a financial program broadcast on RT, formerly known as Russia Today.
Yeah.
And 3 times a week, I think.
Yeah, three.
You presented.
You've done your notes well.
You know, thank you.
You've done your homework.
You've
3 times a week. That's
you
right.
presented for the BBC, Al Jazeera. You write for the Huffington Post.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure having you, Max.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You know, I say we get straight to it, gentlemen. Let's toss it all out the window, because why we're here is to talk about what is a Bitcoin and why do we care, Max?
I thought we were going to start off talking about Martha Stewart. Because Alessio has his copy of Success magazine
Hold
that
that
he
up.
brought along
Hold that up right
with
your
Martha
face.
Stewart.
Yeah.
You know, and this is, you know,
it's a good magazine.
Yeah, they've changed their remit a little bit. It's about success getting out of jail. This is how to get out of jail.
If for any reason I thought my show wouldn't get hijacked, what was I thinking?
I mean, like, okay, here's a guy. Who's the former CEO of Enron? Is Skilling, Jeff Skilling. Okay, he's success because they're letting him out of jail early.
Yeah,
like 10 years early. He's success.
That's a good lawyer.
Because he's getting out of jail. So also, you know, all the jails are privatized now. They're owned by private corporations. So the great thing for that, if you're in one of these private jails, you can get out by doing a leverage buyout of the jail. So you just borrow $1 billion or $5 billion or $10 billion, you buy the jail,
and let yourself out,
and you walk out a free man, because you see that that's the economy that we're in right now. It's all good. It's all possible.
I love that.
There's no limit to the amount of credit you can borrow at almost 0% interest if you're on the inside or on the right side of the interest rate apartheid wall, as I call it.
All right, I like that. And I want to talk more about that. And I want to talk about gold and silver. But right now, we got to talk Bitcoin. Max, everyone says you're the expert. I go on Twitter, everyone's like, Max. I know no one's the expert on this thing.
In this town, I'm one of the few people that has immersed myself into Bitcoin.
Why did you choose Bitcoin? Because you do a lot of other things too.
Yeah, well, I guess it goes back to the early 90s, you know, when the internet first came around. And I was very intrigued by that. I was living in Paris at the time, and I picked up a copy of Wired magazine, and I just immersed myself into the internet. And this was just before, or at about the time that Netscape was going public, 1994. Yeah. And this is right when, you know, the internet had been around for a while, but it was going to go through this explosive growth period. So I was living in Paris, and I went to Los Angeles, and I just threw myself into the internet. You know, people in Los Angeles were very frightened of the internet. They didn't want anything to do with the internet. Nobody had email addresses. They laughed. They said, "Oh, it's a fad. It's going to go away." And then we had the Blair Witch Project came along, which was really made, Hollywood take notice because it was made for like $60,000 or $100,000, and it did $200 million globally. And it was entirely internet driven. It was like 6 months before it opened, it had this grassroots internet-based campaign and so now suddenly Hollywood got interested. But then they had the problem of intellectual property and copyrights and all that kind of going up against their core business model of controlling the copyright at all costs. But anyway, they took on the internet. The internet, of course, exploded in popularity as such, and I created some technology around that, the virtual specialist technology for trading virtual currencies, and I invented a virtual currency, virtual trading, virtual securities, and a virtual trading platform. And it has a patent on this. It's U.S. patented. There's actually now 4 patents relating to this.
Is this the Hollywood Exchange?
The Hollywood Stock Exchange.
Okay. Does it still exist?
Yeah. Eventually it was sold to Cantor Fitzgerald.
Okay.
And then they moved the whole thing to the top floor of the World Trade Center
I
about
remember.
6 months before 9/11.
Wow.
So it had a happy ending, I guess.
Yes.
So
You know that guy at Cantor, he retrieved like a statue he had on his desk from the 110th floor. It was like some piece of metal, and they brought it to him out of the rubble like a year later, and they were like, here.
Well, I'm writing, you see, this segues into my Bitcoin a little bit, because I have a film project on one of my other projects, an internet project called Pirate My Film. It's a story about a Morgan Stanley broker who, when the first tower was hit on 9/11, he had a choice whether to stay and trade options on airlines and make a lot of money on insider trading or to run for his life.
That's right.
Is this a real story?
Well, I'm piecing together
Okay,
all these bits
of
and
things.
pieces.
I like it already.
And so it looks like he chose to trade options, and then the second tower got hit, and he's dead, and those options were never collected. It's in an account at Alex Brown, the $5 million of the profits. I used to work at Alex Brown, and so I know, for example, Buzzy Krongard, I met a couple of times. He was working for the CIA. He had been working for Alex Brown. So
This is before Bankers Trust bought him.
Deutsche Bank.
Bankers
Bought
Trust, then
Alex
Deutsche.
Brown.
Oh, okay. Might be cheap on first.
So there was a lot of chatter going on between the CIA and Alex Brown leading up to the 9/11 attack. So those options were skyrocketing in value, and the volume was exploding. So there's a lot of chatter, whether there's a lot of information being passed around, and people were trading on that information.
So he was shorting the airlines.
He's buying the puts, essentially.
That's right.
The same thing.
Yeah,
shorting,
same thing,
shorting the stock or buying puts. So they're speculating on. So
It
those,
wasn't a vol play, just puts.
If you look at, like, for example, I was working on Wall Street during the shuttle disaster when it blew up, and we were right after the shuttle blew up. This was in maybe 86 or 85.
Yeah, 86.
And Morton Thiokol was the lead contractor on the solid rocket booster.
The O-ring. Yeah.
And the puts on that thing, obviously you made a killing if you got in there quick enough. So while Christy McAuliffe is, fish food all over the ocean, we were in the brokerage firm, like, buying these options, making lots of money. But the options exploded in value on the upside, the puts, in a way before the 9/11. So you saw the same thing, like something blew up, but before anything happened. That's how they were trading. So it says in the official 9/11 report that they looked into the trading, but it was at an official, reputable firm, Alex Brown, so we trust them, and we're not going to investigate any further. But even though obviously there was a lot of information being passed around. So I put together the story about this guy, and it's a classic American story. Your life, run with your life or make a few $1,000,000. And everyone has to make that decision every day now, especially on the front line of capitalism as such. So he chose, go for the money, and he didn't make it out.
Reasonable decision.
So he's gone.
What do you thought he couldn't make it out?
Because he never collected the cash. It's in there, never collected.
Right.
So I assume he died.
Yeah.
So he's gone. So anyway, I have that project listed on Pirate My Film, which is the site, which only accepts Bitcoin. So this is a roundabout way to get to Bitcoin. Wow. And so it's material that is a bit controversial. So it's nice to have a Bitcoin-based currency to get involved in this, because it's a lot of attributes about Bitcoin that are very attractive. Similarly, for my TV show in Russia Today, we have a couple of journalists went out and did stories out in hot spots in the Middle East and elsewhere. It's very difficult to go and pay these guys or if they need cash out in the field. using the typical channels, bank wires and things like this, because they don't have those facilities or it's very closely monitored. So to be able to fund them with Bitcoin was great. So we got some good stories. And I were able to pay them, and they took payment in Bitcoin.
They did take payment in Bitcoin?
Yeah,
Okay.
when they're doing investigative journalism in war zones, in hotspots. So it's very practical on that sense. So to bring it all the way back to my 1990s experience in Los Angeles and the internet, where Bitcoin is now, I would say it's kind of pre-Netscape in its development. It hasn't really had its coming out party yet. It's just coming together now, and it's divisive. There's a huge group of people that support Bitcoin and think it's got a great future. Then there are people who don't think it's viable for whatever reason, and they are not supportive of Bitcoin. But I think that we're going to see who's going to win this particular debate. Time will tell. I'm putting money where my mouth is, so I have a private equity fund here in the UK that's making now Bitcoin-related investments in startups. So we've got one we were already invested in. We'll have some news about this.
Is this the Karma Fund, or is that different?
No, that was another project I did a few years back. Karma Bank, which was a hedge fund tied to activism.
Okay. This is separate than you have a separate fund.
This is a separate idea. This is a new fund.
There's been a couple new ventures in Silicon Valley for some new companies in the last few days. Not big money, but like $2 million here, $5 million there for
Coinbase is one of them. They just closed on $5 million.
Coinbase. And what are they doing? Are they exchanges?
Coinbase is, they do an exchange. They also are involved in merchant processing, and what's called a wallet. So they store Bitcoin. So they have those three aspects of the business.
I actually opened an account with Coinbase today.
You did?
Okay.
I did.
How many Bitcoins do you own, Max?
Well, I ended up owning a lot because I ended up buying them when I went to a conference in Prague. And I just started accumulating them in the $2, $3 range. And I actually have a lot of Bitcoins now that I don't know where they are because I lost the passwords. I don't know where they are.
Okay.
But of the ones that I do know, it still adds up to a considerable amount. And so the price action, once it got over $45, my Bitcoins on paper anyway went over $1 million. So then they were worth several $1 million. Now they're back to being worth a couple of $1 million. So, but they're now, what I've done is I store them offline essentially as paper Bitcoins, it's called them. It's kind of in cold storage. They're not on the web as such at this time. So it's a lot safer. Then I'm starting also.
But they're not converted to another currency. They're not like in dollars somewhere. They're in Bitcoin.
That's right.
But they're not virtual. They're not like on the Silk Road somewhere.
Right.
They're in an account.
That's right.
Okay.
So then I'm also starting with a firm in Malta, a new fund, which is going to be basically an ETF, an exchange-traded fund, which will be divided. It'll be three parts: Bitcoin, gold, and silver. So you have a way to participate in these three currencies. I think there's a tremendous way to make a comparison between these three. I know. I also want to say Alonzo, but I know that's wrong.
Alessio.
Alessio. I don't know why it's Alessio.
I quite like Alonzo.
I like Alonzo too. That's kind of old school.
We're gold and silver bugs, or we're positive. So we're putting these three together. So let me just finish
gold,
this.
Silver, Bitcoins, the three.
Right.
Okay.
So the three of them. It's an exchange traded fund, but it's going to be through this Malta hedge fund. So it's going to, it's not going to be available like to U.S. and there's $100,000 minimum, et cetera. So it's kind of a high level product, but I'm going to be working on that because I want to get the market cap for Bitcoin's about $1 billion now, and we've got to really get it up to 100 million, 200 million, 300 billion, half a trillion if we want to get it, competing with Forex and getting it out there.
Because $1 billion's nothing for liquidity, is it?
That's right. The liquidity is an issue. Just to even tell you how more on the Bitcoin front, a friend of mine.
Can you give us just a quick definition? That was one of the questions most asked, and Alessio, I want to get your thoughts too. But to a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old,
I don't think you can explain to a 6-year-old. But essentially, it's the Bitcoin protocol, which is from Satoshi Nakamoto, the mysterious developer or team of developers.
He doesn't exist, does he?
Well, I mean,
that's his name they gave, but
it's just mysterious. I mean, it's like it goes back to cryptology and single key cryptology, which is essentially you're looking for these extraordinarily large numbers to create secure online cryptological.
Prime numbers, right? That usually.
Yeah, you're factorizing integers to create these extraordinarily large numbers, and you need a lot of processing power to get those numbers. So what the insight was is like, well, what we'll do is we'll distribute that processing power to a network, and then we'll reward the network by calling the solutions coins or money, and then you can distribute that money, and now you can use it as a currency. And so now you have, and it's limited to 21 million. 21 million coins will be created. It's set to stop there.
Right.
And so you end up with something very interesting. You know, as I said, I was involved in virtual currencies and virtual market making. What you have here is a virtual scarce good, which is new, which is something, which is an insight that you'd have to give the developers of this credit for coming up with this. It's virtual good, but it's a virtual scarce good.
Right, because they cap the number there are, and then I think it's gonna max out in like 2114 at like double the amount, something like that.
21 million bitcoins. I think there's 11 million currently.
Yeah, right, and it's gonna go to.
And there's, I think every 10 minutes, there's at the current rate, there's 25 new bitcoins
every
created.
10 minutes.
Right, so they're being created. And then they go through what's called the triple accounting system for every single transaction is accounted for through every node or of the 20,000 quote unquote miners in the system are verifying every single transaction, every single code.
Okay.
So it has a robustness to it on that front.
And rough market price right now of a single Bitcoin?
It's 105, I think.
Dollars,
Yeah,
right?
actually,
Per dollars.
Okay.
Last time I did a
I own
transaction.
2 Bitcoins. I'm not as rich as Max, but I bought them the other day. I got fleeced on a exchange that was buyers only, and I didn't even see a two-way market, even though I traded for so long, and I paid like 85 pounds for a Bitcoin. I should have paid 71.
Well, no, the exchanges, I think, are the biggest vulnerable spot to the whole Bitcoin ecosystem. You know, the Bitcoin protocol talks about how to mine Bitcoin. It doesn't talk about how to price a Bitcoin. You know, pricing Bitcoin, you need a market for that. And the market is, you know, from my experience creating virtual markets, and I created the virtual specialist technology, you know, I can see where you could, you know, you have to create depth in the market. You have to create liquidity. You need a counterparty to this market, which you don't really have. Right now, the exchanges are just matching buyers and sellers. They don't make a market. And what I mean by that is that on the New York Stock Exchange, I can go down there and I can sell 10,000, 50,000 shares at the market guaranteed. Now, my price might not be great, but they will guarantee a price because if there's not enough of the volume to offset that trade, the specialist acts then as a principal,
Right.
not just as a broker, and they go into their own inventory and they put their own capital at risk
Yeah.
to make that trade happen. Nothing like that in Bitcoin exists currently. And I went to these guys in Malta and I said, I want to borrow 10,000 Bitcoin to be a market maker in Bitcoin because I want to be able to offer liquidity in this Bitcoin product. And, you know, how much would you charge me to borrow 10,000, 20,000 Bitcoin? And, you know, they came back with a rate of like 250%, which is obviously totally uneconomical and that doesn't work.
Pulled that out of the air.
Yeah, I mean, but if that's where the market is to borrow to create a liquid market, then that's going to be an issue going forward. There's another startup called Keiser, which just got their seed round of financing. There's some banking guys in there. I believe that they're going to try to come in with some solution to this. I am now involved in a new project called Trade 4.
Okay, the number 4.
Trade 4, F-O-R, Trade 4.
I want to talk about that. I just want to talk about liquidity really quick because Alessio knows all about liquidity because you only trade liquid instruments, right? Specifically, say S&P futures.
S&Ps, other forex markets are pretty liquid, euro, dollar.
Okay, which Max, I mean, those are the most liquid markets in the world, maybe except for spot FX and things like that.
Well, I mean, I follow Alessio's work. I mean, he's a technical trader, he's a momentum trader, and he's an active trader. And so for Bitcoin, it's such a nascent currency at this point that you can't really look at it. People say, well, the chart on Bitcoin looks great or looks terrible. That's an absurd statement. You can't say it has any chart pattern,
right?
Because it's like saying, you know, a fetus is only 2 days old and saying that he'd make a great attorney. And I was like, it's only 2 days old.
That's true. There isn't sufficient history. I agree with you.
Yeah, I called ICAP and asked him to send me a chart on Bloomberg of Bitcoin.
I have actually a chart here.
You do?
I brought it with me.
Because he said there was nothing. Can you just hold that up to the camera?
Yeah, sure. Not very good, but...
Now, as Max said, it's so illiquid. Where did you get these dates, these price points from?
I think the main reason why so many people are talking about Bitcoin, and this is what's worrying me, because I've lost count of how many emails I've had, Brian, Max, last month from folks asking me, "Hey, Alessio, what do you think of Bitcoin, you know?" And I got to be honest, the main reason why it's caused such interest is because of this. You know, this is as Max was saying earlier, you got a massive jump from 20 bucks going all the way to 260.
Was this April 10th? Was this
Right,
the recent
exactly,
spike
by
this year?
April. That's right.
Yeah, it was.
And there's this massive crash all the way down to.
It was like 266
to 55,
to 76 back to 160 within 6 hours, they said.
Right.
Sure.
But if there's no liquidity, I guess things do move. Right?
Well,
Well-
there's all kinds of. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go
Well,
ahead.
basically, the thing is, this is what's caused all the buzz about it. It's what people are ever talking about. As soon as people think, oh, okay, there's a way I can get rich quick on this currency or on this market, that's what people are. I mean, people are essentially driven by their emotions, and the idea of making hyperbolic returns like that in a few days or a few weeks, it's obviously appealing for a lot of, I would say, perhaps new traders or maybe inexperienced folks out there.
So we wouldn't be sitting here be talking if there wasn't that volatility a couple months ago.
I don't think so. I put it this way. If Bitcoin was just going sideways like that, I cannot imagine people be talking about it right now because there's plenty of other things they could be putting their
Agree
money
or
in.
disagree, Max?
I agree, but I think that it's also important to have these huge price breakouts to get the attention and to get people into it. And trading is speculative and risky. And
I will say this though. Listen, I mean, we can sit here and talk about Bitcoin till we're blue in the face, and we can say Bitcoin is going to be the new currency. There's a massive liquidity problem. There's all kinds of issues. Given all that, we can talk about it for hours and days, maybe months. The biggest problem is not so much what Bitcoin is going to be, whether it's going to be the new revolution on money. The biggest problem right now is this, and I brought this with me, Brian, to show everybody.
With Martha Stewart again? Oh.
No, it's not. It's not Martha Stewart.
Jesus.
Whoa.
It's worse than Martha Stewart. It's front cover Economist. For those of you listening to this, you can't see it, but front cover Economist magazine last week. I actually bought this just to show people. It says, on the front cover, it says, Generation Jobless. Okay. The problem is not Bitcoin and what it's going to be. The problem is where Bitcoin is going to go. Whose pocket is it going to end up into, right? The biggest problem is going to be the imbalance of power, imbalance of wealth. Because, okay, let's say Bitcoin does double in value. Let's say Bitcoin does bubble into something new and people make money. The bottom line is going to be who's got how much of Bitcoin and who's got less.
And you're saying it's the young kids that are going to control
Well,
this
I'm
market?
saying the majority, according to the Economist, is saying that 300 million young people right now are out of jobs. They don't have. There's no. Essentially, they don't have any careers. They can't find work. 300 million worldwide. Situation's worse in America. Situation's also pretty bad in Europe as well. And this is what's important right now, folks. Because if you're watching this, so here says the global rise of youth unemployment is what's on the cover, and I find this is. I mean, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a communist, anything like that, but it's probably kind of a strange thing for me to say. But I do find it I do hate injustice like this. When there are young people coming out of university right now. About a couple of months ago, I went to the University of Groningen in Holland, a very prestigious university. And I warned them, and I warned the people at that university, look, don't just think you're going to come out and find yourself a job. If you're lucky if you do, because most companies right now are not hiring. But the problem is people are focused so much on getting a job, and job really stands for what? It stands for just over broke, basically. Yeah. What the problem is that young people are not being educated how to make themselves financially free.
Okay, now I understand what you're saying. So you're saying the kids are going to control this currency. Max, there's no Fed on this currency. They can't lower and raise rates. They can't print money. Is that a good thing? And then tie it back. Do you agree with Alessio? Do you think this is the new kids' monetary system that we can't control?
Well, just kind of the macroeconomic dimension of Bitcoin, and as it relates to jobs and global jobs, and so in that context, I would kind of look at what Alessio was saying about the joblessness in the world today, and I would posit that we need to look at what's happening at the central banks, because the central banks are keeping interest rates near 0%, artificially low. And why are they doing that? They're doing that in large part because it's cheaper for speculators to speculate if their cost of borrowing is as close to zero as possible. And but it doesn't help people with capital in their bank accounts, savers. Savers are being penalized.
Yeah.
In this country alone, the money that's saved by having these low rates through quantitative easing from the Bank of England, through, let's say, instruments like mortgages, where people obviously through a tracker rate, or if you have a lower mortgage rate and you're saving money because rates are down, if you add all that up, that means that in Britain there's a 70 billion pound savings due to quantitative easing. But then look at the other side of the ledger. What's being lost from savings account? How much money is not coming into the economy because people are being penalized by artificially low rates? Well, that number is 210 billion pounds. So for every pound they save through artificially keeping rates low to do nothing more than help speculators borrow money, they lose 3 in real capital that would be coming into the economy. And that real capital coming into the economy would be helpful in boosting the economy in ways that would boost jobs. So this lack of jobs is tied to what's happening on that central bank front. It's happening with the bailouts. It's happening with a lot of corruption. And so savers are penalized, and the job market's being penalized. Look at Apple Computer for a second. Here's a company that everyone says, oh, this is a great company. They outsource their labor to China. They make billions and billions of dollars outside the United States. If they were to repatriate that money, they'd have to pay taxes. But they don't. They're going to instead raise a bond through Wall Street using artificially low interest rates, near 0%, to raise $50 billion, to pay a dividend, to buy back their own stock, to reward the executives and reward the shareholders. The jobs are in China. The savers are getting screwed. So they're not an American company. You know, they think they're an American company. What's American about that? They're screwing these people. You know, the margins on the iPad are 500, 600, 700%. They could easily be making iPads in the United States and giving jobs. If you know, and I would say that 3 or 4 weeks ago, and people would say, well, you don't understand. Steve Jobs said that he could never recreate what he's created in China and America. America's never going to get to the point where they can do these manufacturing jobs that these Chinese people can do. And then 3 weeks later, they come. He's dead. He's gone. The current management says we're going to raise a bond so we don't have to repatriate this $9 billion chunk of cash. Now, is that going to go into the economy? Is that going to help pay off the multi-trillion dollars worth of debt? Is that going to create capital formation?
So are you saying Bitcoin would, since it's not going to have a central bank and not going to have this artificial regulation, is the currency of the future?
So then we go to Bitcoin. So now, yeah. So I'm saying is I'm meaning where the central banks are involved in policies that are self-serving for themselves and the people that are closest to the central bank. Quantitative easing and these other policies directly benefit those people who are closest to the source, which are the bankers. They get the first crack at the money, et cetera. So there's a lot of outrage with how the financial engineering around the world has produced this permanent state of joblessness. And in that outrage, we've seen a few different things. We saw Occupy Wall Street. We saw a campaign I did called Crash JP Morgan Buy Silver.
Right.
You know, JP Morgan has a huge silver short position. You take the physical off the market. You pressure JP Morgan. Into that vacuum, and Satoshi, the mythical figure behind Bitcoin, he says, you know, he did make some comments before he disappeared that he had huge objections to the banking system, the way it was constructed, the way it worked, and this was his answer to try to take it to another level. So the central banks and these corrupt bankers, lawyers, and accountants created the vacuum, and into that vacuum have come these different expressions, either a social protest or a campaign like mine, which tries to mix, you know, activism and capitalism, and then this new currency, this new virtual currency, which I think from the reaction we've seen now from the establishment, they understand that there is something that is threatening to them. You know, Bart Chilton at the CFTC, who for some reason, he was presented with bold-faced facts about manipulation of the silver market. He's given the smoking gun, the proof. This Bart Chilton is this regulator at the CFTC. He's this big blonde bouffon, and he comes out there and he tries to, you know, jiggle his. He has little pasties on, and he'd rather be a stripper. This guy, but for some reason he's a regulator.
Okay.
But we gave him a smoking gun evidence on silver futures, but he said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't see anything. I'm blind. I can't see anything." Box office futures contracts, which is based on my technology, the virtual specialist technology. At the last minute, the MPAA lobbied him and said, put in a law for Graham Dodd not to outlaw box office futures contracts. The Hollywood industry is the only industry in America that's protected by law where you can't have futures contracts. Every other industry gets fucked up the ass from protecting futures contracts. The food industry, the finance industry, the housing industry. Everyone's dealing with Wall Street, the derivatives, the speculation, they're fucking up the ass. But Hollywood, no, it's against the law because Bart Chilton is a corrupt motherfucking asshole. And if I see him on the street, I'm gonna rip his fucking head off. Okay, that's Bart Chilton.
And Bitcoin will save all this.
So with Bitcoin, he suddenly comes along and he goes, he's like, oh, it's a problem, it's a problem, it's a problem. Well, when did he grow brains suddenly? Jamie Dimon needs to take his hand out of Bart Chilton's asshole.
This is the president of JP Morgan.
Yeah, and let Bart speak for himself.
So they're all colluding.
You suck, Bart. You suck!
Don't knock that camera over. All right. So Max, you're saying that the regulators are collaborating with the bankers, and then who knows, maybe the guys on the Fed, and you're saying this thing takes them all out of the equation, Bitcoin.
Bitcoin into the vacuum comes Bitcoin.
Is that why they're scared of it too?
Well, they're scared of it because they can't manipulate it the way they manipulate everything else. They can't regulate it the way they're not regulating everything else. It is a true supply and demand currency in a lot of ways, which they don't want supply and demand. If there was true supply and demand in the American interest rate market and the bond market, interest rates would be 5 or 6% right now, not 1.5% or whatever it is on the 10-year bond. There's no supply and demand. You would have Paul Krugman writing an editorial in the New York Times where he gets on his knees and he fillets Ben Bernanke in public. Is that the most disgraceful thing? As an American, I cried. So here's a New York Times on the knee pads, and he's got balls. He's got Bernanke's ball slapping on his chin.
Christ.
He's gobbling Bernanke's goo. He's saying, "You have to trust the chairman. The chairman is God." I mean, Paul Krugman, does your wife know that you're into Bernanke like that? You're a disgrace, my friend.
I have to get your opinion on this, not on the homosexual act in question, but do you agree that these rates are artificially low? Do you agree with Max is saying?
Probably, but the thing what's happening right now, what's interesting right now is that folks who are fed up with those low rates or getting nothing, they're getting jack on their savings and their bond investments. They're now, it's called the Great Migration now. Wall Street's calling it the Great Migration. We've seen the Dow, for example, hitting 15,000 recently.
Yeah,
and
all new highs. Basically.
That's right, all new highs. And this being broadcasted on media, financial channels are talking about it. What's going to happen right now, and as Max was saying, people are fed up getting those ridiculous, pathetic rates. They're getting no returns on their money.
I mean, compared to inflation in the UK, I mean, you're fucked.
That's right.
Right? I mean, why would you put money in a savings account?
Right, and what's happening is people are now wisening up to the fact, oh my God, I'm missing out on this opportunity in the stock market where the stock market is making new highs. I can't miss this out. I can't miss out on this. And the biggest mistake is happening right now where just ordinary people, ordinary ma and pa, investors, regular folks, are now are now going to be racing to the stock market in droves. So I would actually be seeing the stock market going a lot higher in the medium term and by the end of this year.
All right. I still want to wrap this whole Bitcoin thing up before we talk about gold and silver. So
let me just follow up on this point about the stock market and 15,000 on the Dow Jones. Okay, it's hit a new all-time high. So has margin debt. So is debt. Okay, if you were
correlated, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's totally correlated. Okay. What percentage capitalization, for example, in quantitative easing, with the capitalization of the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve Bank? It's one for one. That just because the Federal Reserve Bank expanded their balance sheet to now it's $3.5–4 trillion that they've injected into speculators' hands to go and leverage that by 10, 20, 30%, to put trillions of dollars into the market, totally leveraged on companies that are generating nothing really exceptional in terms of profits whatsoever. Somebody, again, Paul Krugman makes the argument that, well, the companies are making great profits. According to who? According to their accountants, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte Touche, who've been involved in every single scandal of the past 5 to 10 years. Arthur Andersen, how come they're not with us anymore? Because they cooked Enron's books. Who cooked WorldCom's book? Who's cooking JP Morgan's books? Is it any one of these 4 accountants? The 4 accountants, they say they're making money. They're corrupt, just like the fund managers and just like these other guys in this circle of death. It's shameless.
All corrupt.
The thing is, Max, though, the thing is that even if Bitcoin was to become accepted as a form of currency, eventually that whole corruption is going to infiltrate Bitcoin too.
Well, I want to ask a question now.
It's,
Now, FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in the U.S.,
Yeah.
in March came out and said, if you own bitcoins, you're not a money launderer. You won't worry about you, but we're going to watch the people that are exchanging it, right? I mean, basically, it seemed like one step away from almost making them illegal. Now, you own millions of dollars worth of bitcoins. How do you sleep at night knowing that your virtual currency might drop to zero?
Like I said, it's not the biggest portion of my portfolio. It's
Okay.
offline. It's something that I don't spend. It's just accumulating. I have no gains to report. I have nothing. There's no taxable events. There's no gains. It just happened to like a mushroom grow in the dark, and it just sprouted, and there it is.
Could they be made illegal in your mind? Is it possible for the U.S. and the U.K. to?
Well, I think that you have to understand that the U.S. or the U.K. and the U.K., if they want to get aggressive on that side, it'll just go to China, India, Latin America. In Venezuela, where the inflation is raging, we see Bitcoin. Cyprus, where they have capital controls, we see Bitcoin. China, which is, or Vietnam, or these places, India, where they're trying to manage the importation of gold, we're seeing Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is showing up. And Bitcoin, first of all, let's say that it never goes back and forth in and out of a dollar or a fiat currency. It just stays in Bitcoin. And people accepting Bitcoin, they mine Bitcoin, and it's a totally closed environment of Bitcoin, and it doesn't interact at all with those other fiat currencies. That could happen. That would take a lot slower for the market cap to rise. I mean, I'd rather see 20 billion, 30 billion, 100 billion, move into Bitcoin right now and get the price up to 100,000, 200,000 per Bitcoin. I'd love that.
Because with only 21 million Bitcoins total, these things have to rise in value to get any kind of reasonable market cap, right? Is 21 million Bitcoins enough? I guess it doesn't matter. It's like a price of Berkshire Hathaway. It doesn't matter how many shares.
Well, unlike
there are.
Berkshire Hathaway, which they can print stock at any time, this is a closed number of Bitcoins.
Right, but they're famous for having like one share being costing like $250,000, as in.
Yeah, it's 160,000 per share.
So
I made a bet with Warren Buffett that Bitcoin will get to 200,000 per Bitcoin before Berkshire Hathaway does, and I bet him a large number of Bitcoin that it would do so.
Okay,
I haven't heard from Warren yet. I don't know why. He's with Charlie Munger. They're probably with Ben Bernanke and Paul Krugman. It's a foursome.
Those guys are
disgusting.
in
The 4 peas in a pod.
Capitalist gangbang.
All right, it's horrible. All right, so it doesn't matter they're 21 million because it's just pieces of pieces. You can have one Bitcoin.
They're fungible
Bitcoins.
to 8 decimal places.
Right, so it
the
doesn't matter.
Satoshi is, I think, 1/10,000th of a Bitcoin. That's a Satoshi.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I think the thing is, there are a lot of Bitcoin enthusiasts who are saying
Max is one of them.
probably, yeah, I guess. But I mean, I haven't heard of Max from Max himself. There are many out there saying that Bitcoin is not going to be subject to the sort of printing easing, monetary easing we've seen in other currencies.
It's built in the system technically.
But basically, I disagree with that. I think that's complete nonsense. I think just like any other form of currency, there's no reason why they can't increase the supply of it. And actually, a lot of people who are in favor of Bitcoins seem to misunderstand. They think that because Bitcoin is electronic, that somehow when the Fed increases the money supply, that they're actually literally printing money off the press, which is not true. When they print, they're actually talking about electronic money as well. But people think that printing literally means printing off the, off the press.
Well, what I understand, the algorithm caps Bitcoin, but
Well, I mean,
bottom line here,
aside from increasing the
bottom line
Bitcoin.
I'm trying to make here is this. There's one of the arguments people are not maybe making is against Bitcoin is there's nothing to stop someone else coming out and say, hey, I've got a new and better version of Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah, buy my Bitcoin. It's better than the old brand. And that's going to be a major threat to anyone who owns Bitcoin or is thinking of making money in Bitcoin. I got a friend of mine who recently just bought 5,000 pounds, which is actually put a lot of money into, probably even more than that, into Bitcoin. And I warned her, look, you got to protect what you have. And this is what people who are watching this right now should realize that before you think about, hey, I'm going to make a killing in Bitcoin, first of all, learn about how to protect what you have, protect your assets. The more you learn about markets and investing in markets, or any kind of investing, the more you learn, you got to protect your assets, protect your bottom line. Risk management is the most important thing, Brian. That's the most important thing.
I'm with you on that. Now, there are other alternatives like Litecoin, and there are some other ones out there. But, I mean, do you think...
can I respond?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as the Bitcoin itself, the threat of increased supply of Bitcoin, I don't see as a really a threat that I'm worried about. But the idea of having alternative competing virtual currencies is definitely in the mix. There's definitely other of these cryptocurrencies out there. I believe there's over 40 right now that are working in various, that are working out. Litecoin is one of them, and there are others. There are already many of these cryptocurrencies out there. They haven't captured anywhere near the market share. With Bitcoin, it has captured a huge amount of market share, and it has the hashing power. It has the power of these 20,000 computers all networked together, which is enormous. It's the largest single distributed computer project in history. It's bigger now than even SETA, which was the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence project, where people were giving the CPU, excess CPU bandwidth on their computers over to this project. It's now exceeded that project. So this is the largest distributed computer project ever in the history of the world. The comparison to mining is really an apt one, because as you know, when you're gold mining, it costs a lot more money to go down deeper, and as you get down deeper, the costs get higher and it becomes scarce. Same thing with Bitcoin. As you get deeper into this 21 million pool of Bitcoin, the computer power is increased. The installed negative cost of having all this happen is already behind us. So it's the hurdle to overcome this and to compete with it. It gets higher and higher and higher. It's like saying
there are people actually mining coins right now. That's hard to get my head around.
That's right.
They're using technology to mine 25 coins every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're getting them, and now they have Bitcoin value.
Yeah, I mean, once it has kind of an entrenched position, it's going to be very, very difficult to knock it off. So, I mean, It's hard to come out with, anyone can come out with a cola product, but are they going to knock Coca-Cola off is the number one product?
You're comparing
it's doubtful.
Bitcoin to like Virgin Cola, basically. You're saying Bitcoin is the
who's one? The Bitcoin is becoming the de facto standard, and now as all this venture capital money comes in, it adds to that story. So I think
they should call it Itcoin.
Well, you should talk to Satoshi about that. Because,
maybe Coca-Cola isn't the best example. I mean, you had Apple come out with the iPhone first, and then we saw Samsung has taken a major step ahead of Apple. with their sales.
Sure.
So, maybe Coca-Cola isn't the best example, but anything can be copied.
Yeah, and Netscape and Internet Explorer
and let's face it,
that kind of thing.
But the Bitcoin protocol is different in that the ability to solve these ever increasingly more complicated numbers, it requires this huge distributed computer network. So it's really unique in that sense. You can't just come out and knock it off in that way. So I think the comparison to mining or gold mining is really the one you have to do. It's not like I made the comparison to Coke in terms of its ability to dominate its space. But I think to compare it, you have to compare it to its unique, what I call its intrinsic value, which is, I think, of all the things I've written about of the Bitcoin space over the past 6 months, there's two things I've written about that people have written back and said they disagree. I've said it has intrinsic value. And then I've also wrote, which people said has no, I believe it does. People say it doesn't.
Because of the algorithms and all of
because of the comparison to mining.
Right.
And then
but why not, Max?
Well, let me just say the second thing I wrote was that I said, should there be a dollar peg to Bitcoin? So now the Bitcoin community freaked out about this because it goes against every single the ethos of but they didn't read my whole piece really. They just looked at dollar peg and they went ballistic over this. They didn't. I was coming. There's a hole to this argument. There's a lot of pieces to it that nobody was really getting into, but it just triggered an explosion. Oh my God, how could you say that? But anyway, those are the two things I've written that have been in the Bitcoin community itself. There's been some outrage.
Well, yeah, those are strong statements. You don't like the fact there's intrinsic value. They say that gold doesn't have intrinsic value because these days there's better superconductors, people don't need rings, blah, blah, blah.
At least gold, gold is a real, you got something real holding your hand. What I'm trying to point is, why not, Max, say, well, here's my argument, here's my issue. Why not just say, hey folks, instead of putting your money into some electronic currency that doesn't exist, why not just go and buy an ounce of silver? An ounce of silver right now is $23, and it probably gets cheaper as well in the short term. That's real money. Silver is real money, and gold is real money. Why not just go buy it?
That's why I'm launching this fund, which is going to be Bitcoin, gold, and silver.
Okay.
So you're dividing it up into these three categories. I'm making this saying, here's a comparison, but I'm saying to be prudent, spread it out over what I consider to be the other forms of money out there, gold and silver. I think
I think
Bitcoin is money.
you're doing the right thing because, I mean, you said earlier that it's only part of your portfolio, probably a small part of your portfolio putting into Bitcoins. I think that's probably something a lot of people who are maybe listening to this might have, maybe they don't pay attention to that point, which is professionals like Max, myself, and you, Brian. I mean,
Back in the day.
yeah. Well, we
diversify is what you're
diversify and make sure that your portfolio is balanced, and the riskier assets must be kept, to a lower percentage of your overall portfolio. But of course, most people out there probably won't get that, and people who maybe new to trading or maybe are inexperienced, what they usually do is they put almost all their money into something like.
I have an important question. One of my Twitter guys hit me back and he said Bitcoin will exist as a real and viable currency because derivatives aren't involved. And I tweeted back and said, okay, I promise to pay you in 2 days for a Bitcoin at a pre-approved price. That's a derivative. So are there going to be derivatives on Bitcoins, and is that the reason it will or won't succeed as a currency? Max?
Well, look at the price of silver for a second. What is the price of silver?
23 and
Or what's the price?
20.
What's the price of gold?
I don't know.
It was last time I checked. It was like 1460.
Okay, how do you know that? You
Because
know
there's an
that
exchange.
because you get the price from the futures exchange.
And Bloomberg, yeah.
You don't have a cash price for gold because there is no cash price of gold. We only know the futures price of gold.
Interesting.
We don't know what the cash price of gold is. We don't know what the cash price of silver price is. There's only the futures price. With the paper price, that's the price. So that's a derivative. We don't know what the underlying price is of gold.
And we don't
silver.
need to
Now,
necessarily.
for-
Underlying, I mean, the real price of gold.
That's
I
like
mean,
that's
because
what
there's
you mean
two,
when it physically delivered
What-
on
what-
that
I'll
day.
give
There's
you the
two
price
kinds of
silver.
gold.
If I'll sell you my silver right now for $40 an ounce. The paper price is what, 27? That's nonsense. I'll give you for 40 because I know that it's in backwardation. The spot price, the real price is higher than the futures price. That's the
Okay.
real price. But that's not published because that's part of what we were talking about earlier about this, the relationships and it was, Alessio was talking about with the joblessness and all the macro economy, the problems there. One of the biggest problems is that we don't have a real legitimate price for gold. So now Bitcoin is the cash price.
Okay.
That's the supply and demand price. The derivatives that would come on top of Bitcoin would be the derivatives price.
It wouldn't be a bad thing to have 3-month futures on Bitcoin, options on futures on Bitcoin.
No, because I argue that derivatives are no problem at all as long as you have a cash price, which is the current price. That's the current supply and demand price of Bitcoin.
Spot price.
It's a crappy market. It's illiquid. The MT Gox in Japan has 80% of it, and they don't know what they're doing. They don't even have a legitimate market. It's
This
just
is
a matching service for buyers and sellers. There is no depth at all, and that's where we are in the Bitcoin story.
This is like a Bitcoin exchange. It's MT Gox, I think, is what it is. That you're talking about.
Well, what's exciting is on the payment front. The payment front. So you have a couple of companies that are very involved in payments.
This guy in San Francisco recently spent a whole week of his life and lived on Bitcoins.
Yeah.
And he had a hard time because he could only do certain things, but he actually managed to live and eat in San
Right. So
Francisco. on Bitcoins.
thousands of merchants are now starting to accept Bitcoin.
I haven't seen one in London.
There are a few, but as I get more active here, I'm going to be more proselytizing the benefits of Bitcoin and getting it out there more. And it's just like guys like me, the foot soldiers, are going to be out there, accept Bitcoin.
Apparently there was a de facto exchange in Union Square in New York the other day where guys were out quoting just like they used to on Wall Street underneath the tree 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And they were buying and selling Bitcoins, and then whoever bought it, the guy took a picture of the alphanumeric code and they transferred to Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, that's a legitimate market.
Because there's
It's
no
a cash
exchanges.
market.
Now,
You can go to a cash market here in London. You meet up and you swap Bitcoins in a cafe, for example.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, your article in the Huffington Post said that until we can have exchanges, this is like beaver pelts. Because since there's no
Right,
price,
'cause you're just trading, right.
we don't know what's going on.
All the price is negotiated on a per transaction basis, and then you say, well, the last 30 transactions have been at a certain price, so we'll say that's the price. But that's not a market. A
in
market.
fact, because most merchants probably don't want to take on Bitcoin if it has so much volatility and illiquidity, which we've been talking about so far. Until the liquidity problem and the huge volatile movements are solved, no merchant wants to have anything to do with Bitcoin.
I agree with you on that.
Justifiably so.
Or the bid offer
But
will
it's
be
changing as the
ridiculous.
price goes up, which is a good reason to get the price up. Then the relative tail price distortion or elasticity as a percentage will become smaller. I believe that would be the alpha of Bitcoin would shrink as the price goes higher. So if it's Bitcoin at 100,000 per Bitcoin, if it's up or down $100 on any given
Percentage
second,
volatility is less.
on a percentage basis, that's nothing.
Okay, let me talk not about an elephant in the room, but there's something called the Silk Road, which is this underground internet where you can buy everything from, it used to be assassinations, but they outlawed it, but illicit drugs, you name it, and you use Bitcoins because it's a anonymous source of cash. Is this a small part of the Bitcoin market, or is this something that will keep the regulators on edge and potentially ban it? Have you been on the Silk Road?
So Silk Road, you can buy drugs to Bitcoin. Is that what's going on?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you something.
You haven't been on the Silk Road?
I may or may not have.
Fair enough. You been on the Silk Road?
No, I'm not.
That's a lie.
I've been there.
Don't let my suit and tie.
Max, it's hard to get one past.
He dropped acid before the show. He's high right now.
Jesus.
That's why he wears that suit and tie. He's
Funny,
like,
I actually
I'm
heard.
chilling, man.
I actually heard from a friend of mine that in Zurich,
Yeah.
in Switzerland, Zurich, possessing cocaine is not illegal. I did not know that.
Yeah,
But
they
apparently,
give away heroin too, I think.
Apparently, a friend of mine told me that having cocaine is so accepted in Zurich, Switzerland, that practically it's not illegal
Okay.
to possess it.
We were talking about the Silk Road.
Yeah. You see, as I said,
point.
he's high.
He's high.
He's high, man.
He's,
No, I am
off on a
not.
tangent.
Coke or
He's
LSD?
like, yeah,
What's
man.
going on?
No, I'm not.
What's-
Don't do drugs at all.
All right, but it is something we have to address because.
No, I'm gonna.
Okay, yeah. go
Right
ahead.
now.
Go
I
ahead.
was addressing that point. Okay, so Silk Road, Bitcoin, buying drugs. Okay, let's see. Well, let's talk about HSBC. Okay. There's a bank
They take drugs?
They were caught laundering $8 billion of Mexican drug
Mexico,
cartel
yeah.
money.
Yeah.
They don't deny it. They paid maybe a little fine. 60,000 dead Mexicans, war on drugs because of money laundering, thanks to HSBC. Mexicans with their heads cut off rolling down the street because of HSBC, one of the biggest money laundering outfits and drug
Yeah, and the drug demand in the
supporters
US.
in the world. Okay, so are they the biggest? No, there's one even bigger. It's called Wachovia Bank. They were caught laundering $400 billion in Mexican drug money. They were bought by Wells Fargo, which is now their biggest shareholder, is Warren Buffett. At Warren Buffett's annual meeting where he's playing little ukulele, singing about Charlie Munger's cock he's got in his mouth. Did he
Jesus.
happen to say, oh, I just bought Wells Fargo. They laundered lots of drug money. Mexicans are dead. Happy me, I'm Warren. Happy Warren, happy Warren. I kill Mexicans. No, he didn't say that, did he?
No.
But he's complicit. He's complicit in their murder.
Okay.
He's complicit in the gun running that goes between America and Mexico. He's a terrorist. And I don't use that term loosely. Warren Buffett is a financial terrorist. George Osborne is a financial terrorist. The heads of Bank of America, HSBC, Barclays, Lloyds, Royal Bank of Scotland, they are financial terrorists. The fact that George Osborne allows terrorism right here in London unchecked, just running amok in the city, is unconscionable. It's tyranny. The people in this country should be outraged, and they should do what they have to do to restore justice
Which
in
is
whatever
what?
means necessary.
Which is what?
I leave it up to their imagination.
Okay. So your point is the Silk Road is a tiny little speck
It's
of the drug
fly
trade.
shit in the pepper.
Okay.
It's meaningless. And besides,
But it is-
every technology is supported by drugs and sex. Even the Bible starts out with a pornographic story about Adam and Eve. Every single technology, the VCR, the videotape, the DVD, the CD, it all starts with sex, porno, and drugs. Rock and roll is all about sex and drugs. This is the beginning of everything. It's always about a man and a woman getting together and rocking and rolling. It's the genesis of us all. It's what hell happens. And Bitcoin is the same. And Satoshi is Cyber Christ. He's the virgin currency. He's come from a parallel universe to save us. And Ben Bernanke's going to get fucked. He's going to get fucked. He's going to get fucked.
I think, Max, you forgot to take your medication today.
No, I think he took it.
Oh, you did take it.
That's awesome. Max is right. Every new technology, it has always been brought along with porn and those industries, so I can't disagree with you there. Jesus Christ.
Oh.
And now he's off. All right, I have to quickly ask, and then we'll move off Bitcoin. Will there be some type of open source, person-to-person exchange, where we're finally going to sort this out, as opposed to these companies that are just goofing around in Japan, like you're talking about? Will you set up an exchange for us, Max Keiser?
Well, I was in touch with a couple of guys, young guys here in London, who want to start an exchange here in London. And, but, they don't seem to want to go down the path of exploring the issues that I have brought up in terms of these issues of liquidity and market making. But they, being young guys, said, to hell with you, pops, we're going to just forge ahead. So my current understanding is that you've got these two guys that are forging ahead. They've got an office in Farringdon somewhere, and they are going forward to create an exchange here in London. I guess I'm consulting with them on some basis. I like my project now, which I mentioned earlier, which I'm going to plug. It's called Trade 4.
Yes, we can get to that.
Trade
Please plug
4.
away.
Trade 4 is a new gamification of Bitcoin,
Okay.
where the coins are going to be essentially represented by coupons. And the coupons are going to be tied to giveaways from entertainment companies. And the coupons, we can make a market and make some liquidity in the coupons based on a Bitcoin easier than we can on the actual Bitcoin. So these coupons will trade on this exchange platform, and people will be buying and selling the coupons, which will be up and down with the volatility. So it's a derivative in a sense.
Yeah.
It's a coupon, it's a derivative on the actual.
They do this with stocks in London all the time.
Yeah,
Right? These
so it
certificates.
could be like index, what are they called, spread betting.
Yeah,
So it's
spread
or a derivative of this, but it's a coupon tied to a product that has a certain lifespan. And at the end of the coupon's expiration date, if you own the coupons, you can cash them in. So this is the gamification of Bitcoin. So it goes back to my roots, as the Hollywood Stock Exchange, where we took Hollywood and created a trading platform or a game based on using box office as the currency and as the main economic component of that economy. So this is kind of getting back to that, but using all Bitcoin. And through that gaming aspect, again, gaming is a way a lot of things become very popular as well. So that could also add to the liquidity of it. People will buy Bitcoin and swap it for coupons. Now they're trading the coupons that are tied to Bitcoin, but the volatility is a good thing because it means that they could be making or losing. It's tied to the volatility. See what I'm saying? It's not their actual, once they buy the coupon, the volatility is the game. So they don't, their risk is limited to the amount that they swapped into the coupon.
What do you think?
You guys,
I'm going to
Sounds
make a
pretty crazy.
bet.
Sounds like they're trading vol.
Here's what I'm going to say. I'll make a bet. Let's have an interview this time next year. I guarantee you nobody's going to talk about Bitcoin.
Really?
Okay, if anyone...
bold bet. It's a bold bet.
It's a bold bet.
Very bold.
Why don't we do a forward contract right now between the two of you?
In Bitcoin.
Well,
And I'll take the commission.
Let me explain my point. Look, here's the thing. Everyone's talking about Bitcoin right now. When everyone's talking about some subject, 2 years ago it was all about gold. We know how that ended up. But the bottom line is everyone's talking about Bitcoin. This makes me nervous. This makes me worried. As an investor, I'd be nervous about putting anything into Bitcoin, purely because everyone's talking about it. The best time to get into something, if you're talking about Bitcoin as an investment, by the way, if you want to use it in an exchange, fine, go ahead. But if you're talking about it as an investment, I would stay away from it because you only ever want to be interested in something when nobody else is interested. And right now, for me, it's too risky. And risk is something I just want to stay away from as far as I'm concerned.
Well, as a prudent money manager, that would be the rules that he would use to trade his portfolio. So, that's his thought. My thought is taking the other side of that trade.
Okay. Now, if people want to educate themselves more about Bitcoin, where do you tell them to go? I tried doing research for
I think
this.
it's what bitcoin.org.
.org, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the entryway.
Well, the one I opened my account today was Coinbase. I have the
Coinbase.
Yeah.
Just read every article out there and get someone's new impression every single time.
I will say this though. I opened one, but I did not buy one. And I'm going to say this: I wouldn't even buy one with your money, Brian, or your money, Max.
I own two. I'm not wealthy like Max. So. All right, before we wrap this up, first of all, Max, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. We saw a new side of you today that they must
Really? A new side? I'm really?
3 sides, I think.
I thought you were extreme on Russia Today, but this is great. This is great stuff. I think you need a podcast, maybe.
Yeah, we do it weekly. Yeah, good idea. We'll do it right here. I'll let you produce it.
Done.
Okay.
One thing I did actually
You
want
can
to ask
executive
was,
produce it. I'll pay you in Bitcoin.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
so we'll see how that all works out for you.
One thing I was going to ask you is, how's that drink working out for you? The energy drink.
Oh, pussy drink?
So
I wasn't going to say it.
Caught me at one of my shows. Well, at my show, this is more like what I do in my live show. I do my what I call stand-up rage.
You used to be a stand-up comic,
I
right?
started really in the late 70s doing comedy in New York.
In New York.
Yeah.
Tough scene, huh?
Yeah, but it was fascinating because you had Jerry Seinfeld was the MC at the comic strip in New York, so he was there, and then you had Robin Williams who was at Catch a Rising Star across the street, and
who else was
Rodney Dangerfield. I remember when I went on a Catch a Rising Star once in between right after Rodney Dangerfield and before Robin Williams. And I'm pretty sure that at the end of the night, if you ask somebody, how was Max Keiser, nobody would have had any memory of that whatsoever. So there was something that happened between those two acts. But, you know.
And it got you here, basically.
Well, I mean, it was exciting. So I'm just saying that there was.
What was your style?
It was a lot of people at that time that we see now, like Curb Your Enthusiasm. What's his name?
Larry David.
Larry David. He was hanging out with Jerry Seinfeld at that time. He had Jay Leno's top writer, Jim Brogan, who really had a show before Jerry Seinfeld. They were trying to launch him as the comedian who has a TV show. And then Jim Brogan, then his kind of flopped. Then Seinfeld, like, is the next guy. We'll try this guy. And then his, clicked, and it was fantastic. And
So you were doing stand-up comedy during these guys, and they're blooming, when they're just blooming.
Yeah, that's right. They were all there. Steve Martin was in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
That was the West Coast scene. But I always like. Actually, it's different than what I do now, because I always like kind of the more of a. Who's that guy? Who played a psychiatrist on TV. He had a record called the Button Down Mind of. I can't think of his name. You'll know what it is, but it's very kind of understated, low voltage, kind of understated stuff. At that time, then I was working to support my comedy habit, doing odd jobs. And I had a lot of odd jobs. I worked as a proofreader at a rubber stamp factory for a while.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds like a joke, like a
It
bit.
is. It's very
Was it
funny.
part of your bit as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird job. But
You have to read backwards.
there's a real factory on 23rd Street, which is now Silicon Alley, but it was a rubber stamp factory. And you get these orders that come in, and the proofreader has to match the order with the galley from the guy upstairs and match this all stuff. But one of the jobs that I had, it was to work with a stockbroker at Payne Weber. This was 1982, just to do work with him. And I just walked in there, and it hit me with a ton of bricks. Just like, this is fantastic. This is great. The ticker tape going across the wall is just like totally mesmerizing.
Was it
Just
easy money?
Totally easy money. From 83 to 87, before the crash of 87, was unbelievably easy. Because when I started at that time, most people in the business were older. They had gone through 16 years of a bear market on Wall Street. Wall Street was a dump. Guys are working night jobs to make ends meet. They're working as taxi drivers, school teachers. You couldn't make a living as a stockbroker in 1982.
Wow.
The Dow Jones had not gotten over 1,000. It had, for 16 years, it had tried to get over 1,000.
Okay.
This guy, Alan
Bitcoin
Abelson.
similarities, maybe.
Well, anyway, now it's at 15,000. There's this huge growth. So then all these young guys like myself came in, and we just like took over. And you literally could just call people up in the middle of Iowa, on their tractor at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they would send you $100,000, on a story. And it was extremely easy, for four years. It was just this mountain of cash.
Just pick up the phone, Payne Weber,
It's just
sell
boom,
stock.
boom,
stuff.
boom. I did, we would make, but there's also people calling us. So we'd be getting calls from, Porsche dealers, prostitutes, drug dealers who were cold calling us while we're cold calling America. So you could make $20,000 in on your stock business, but have spent $30,000 that day on a party of some sort. So it's like the money is just like coming in, it's like a velocity of money right there on Wall Street. It's like, it's like a hurricane, a funnel of money. It's just so much of it spinning around. Then you had the crash of 87. Then it got very different, got very corporate.
And then you moved.
Yeah, it got kind of boring. It got very, very corporate, very, because in the early 80s, it was this very punk rock, because punk rock scene in New York kind of merged with Wall Street for about 4 years.
Wow.
So like
That's a
myself, I was doing WNYU radio, and I was feral, I would say, just doing CBGBs, Max's Kansas City, 24 hours in New York, just completely out there. So then, Wall Street, just like the action was so intense, I just thought this would be fantastic, because this is like a party for the daytime to match my party at the nighttime. I need a day party, and this is it. So it's and there's just so much drugs at that point. I mean, the New York Times estimated that 98% of everyone on Wall Street was using cocaine at that time.
Early 80s.
Everyone. It was just coke piled up on desks.
Come on.
Everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
Piled up on desks.
Piled up on desks.
All right, so you'd be all day doing lines and selling stocks at Payne Weber, and then you go to CBGB's at night in East Village. And
After hours clubs, Save the Robots.
Save the
famous
Robots.
club.
I've been there.
Yeah, East Village. all
closed
that
now.
stuff.
I think it's a coffee bar now.
And then 87, the crash of 87, then it was like, it just changed a lot. A lot of people it just changed. It became a lot more corporate. Like the corporate raiders of the 80s, like the Carl Icahns, Ivan Boesky, Michael Milken, those people were all gone, and the new people became very corporate. So the leveraged buyout, which was considered to be corporate raiding, green mail, hostile raids, became, corporate. So you had corporations buying each other out, and it wasn't the same kind of action that you had. I mean, I remember a deal, what was General Electric buying RCA for $66 a share. The stock was at 60. It was a 98% guarantee of that deal closing, and it paid 2 dividends before the deal closed. So you're making 10% plus 2 dividends, and you're just leveraging that up to the hilt. So you're making like 150% on your cash on a guaranteed risk arbitrage deal. And you're just calling people up and just throwing money in their pockets, just a river of cash.
But that's okay with you.
At that time, that was the scene at
deal.
the time.
And then the banks took over a lot of that proprietary
Then
trading
banks got
afterwards.
into it. Yeah, the banks got into it. They kind of got controlled. It became very corporate, and Wall Street changed a lot. So it got a little bit too corporate. So I went to Paris, just got on a plane and just went to Paris and said, I'm just going to go to Paris and see what happens. And I ended up there for about 5 years. And I wrote a treatment for a screenplay that I showed my friend Alec Baldwin, who I knew from NYU, and he showed it to Harvey Weinstein. He bought it for a pretty nice sum of cash. Then I flew to Los Angeles.
What was that screenplay?
It was about these 2 psychic brothers during the post-World War I, where they're pursued by cops.
Alec Baldwin, the actor?
Alec Baldwin and his brother Billy were going to be in the film. Right. And then Harvey Weinstein bought this idea. Then I went to Los Angeles to make this idea, so I left Paris. Then they put it into Turnaround, which is Wall Street, Hollywood talk for, we're going to put it in the freezer. If anyone wants to do it, pay us the money we put into it, which I think they put in a couple $100,000 at that point.
Is this Miramax times or before
yeah, they were
Miramax?
Miramax, yeah.
Right.
So then I had nothing to do, essentially. So I looked up the only person I knew in Los Angeles, so I knew from Wall Street, and we started this thing. I said, I'm so bored in Hollywood. This is the boringest town I've ever been in. First of all, there's nothing to trade here. I said, we need a Hollywood Stock Exchange. And he's like, that's a great idea. So we launched that, and then that was a big story there.
Wow. Russia Today, what's it like working for RT? How long have you been there?
I've been there, I think, 3 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
What do you think about what people say about it? That
So RT is fully funded by an NGO, which is fully funded by the Kremlin, right? And Putin just said we're giving $300 million to this organization for the rest of time.
So is it just Russian propaganda machine for Kremlin and
Well,
Putin?
there's first of all of these big networks are state funded. BBC is state funded.
Yes.
Al Jazeera is state funded.
Qatar.
RT is state funded. Press TV, I worked for, is state funded. I had a show there for a while.
American broadcasters.
Fox News is, if you think about it, state funded because the military comes on Fox News. They don't say we're selling weapons, but we're supporting a war. That's called propaganda, and that's a state function. So that's
funding, not funding, but okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, but it's propaganda.
Okay.
Fox News, CBS, CNBC. But on the propaganda question, though, I always think that it's actually flowing in the opposite direction, because since I started on RT, Russia's increased their gold buys substantially. So when I'm on my show, I've got my own message to the Kremlin, which is keep buying gold. Keep buying gold. And they have been buying gold. They're the biggest gold buyers in the world. Why is that? Keep buying gold. Keep buying gold. So
that's actually one thing.
What are you saying?
It's my propaganda. It's Max agenda.
Oh, you're running it back on them.
Yeah, it's a game. It's a game within a game within a game. I'm all about gold and silver. I'm on RT. Now they're buying gold. They're buying gold. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? It's in the mind. It's in the mind.
Well, that's one thing we can agree on with Max buying gold. That's
Yeah, we totally agree on gold.
You guys are with that. And what if the U.S. funded a press situation that would then go into Russia and do investigative journalism in Russia? Everyone would throw their hands up, right? Yet the opposite is kind of happening with RT.
Well, the U.S. dominates the global news agenda quite handily, and they back it up with the Pentagon and a global spy network. So there's nobody who believes that the U.S. is without media outlets around the world doing their bidding and pushing their agenda. The wealth being aggregated in America in the record hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars is not by accident. You look at the corruption in the media space, the banking space, the brokering space, the accountants, they're really dirty, like KPMG and the rest, they're the dirtiest of the lot. This all is backed up by the world reserve currency, the US dollar. And if you talk to people like Paul Craig Roberts, who was in the Reagan administration, or Catherine Austin Fitts, who worked in government as well with Reagan, they always say, well, what backs the dollar? What backs the dollar is the Pentagon. What backs the Pentagon is the media. So there's no shortage of America's interests being carried around the world. What's ingenious, I think, was that the state of Qatar came out with Al Jazeera English. So they set the ball rolling on a global phenomenon where every country in the world now has an English-speaking 24-hour news channel. So you had Al Jazeera. When we started making films for Al Jazeera, George Bush wanted to bomb their headquarters in Qatar. They killed one of their reporters in Baghdad. And we got tremendous flack for doing films for Al Jazeera English during the Iraq War period. But the stories I was doing, like Iceland's economy is about to collapse. We went to Iceland and exposed this. Or that these other corruption forces are at work. They got out there into the public domain through this English-speaking channel, and it should have been on the U.S. TV, but they weren't because there's a bias against Al Jazeera English. But anyway, so Al Jazeera English started the ball rolling. Then you have now Russia Today. You've got France 24, which is in English. You've got CCTV, which is Chinese. You've got Press TV, Iranian.
So all pretty well. They're doing well. Russia Today has big numbers.
I think on YouTube, their number of views just exceeded the BBC. So they're number one on YouTube for number of views. They have now a bigger reach, I believe, than BBC. So it's over 600 million around the world. Cable, satellite. Wherever I go, anywhere in the world, people know me. They watch the show.
Do they run, or they run to you or from you?
Well, they know if I'm in town, things must be bad. So they get worried. They're like, oh, I just saw Max. It's like the Grim Reaper.
Oh, there's bitcoins around.
Not that guy. We must be in trouble. That's why I'm in London, to cover the collapse of the UK economy. Because I'm a war reporter. I got to be on the front line. This is the new Iceland. This is the new Greece. Right here in London. This is the new war zone.
When's it happening?
It's happening now. Look, the country is in dire straits. This buy to fund scheme for real estate, another huge Ponzi scheme from the crackerhead mind of George Osborne, that's destined to fail. Looks horrible.
Okay.
The people are restless.
Do you have any money in pounds?
No.
No. Okay.
I have a few pounds in my pocket.
And bitcoins everywhere else. Max, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I don't think my microphones have ever had that volume. And I think
they seem to work.
Yeah, I think they're going to be all right. People to get in touch with you on Twitter, you're at Max Keiser. You're on television at RT.
You just put up a Max signal in the sky.
And you'll be there.
It's kind of like Batman.
Like a bat.
I just show up. I beam in. I beam in on a beam of Bitcoin. Wherever there's trouble with the fiat currency, I'm there. Just put the big B up in the sky, and Max appears.
I'm going to have bad dreams today. Alessio, thank you for being here. I appreciate the charts. I appreciate the knowledge. How do people get a hold of you? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me again, Brian. People can go onto leadingtrader.com, which is my main base. In fact, we're doing a free online seminar, free webinar on the 1st of June, and you folks can join in. Essentially, we're doing a special 1-hour class online as well, where folks can learn the secrets behind buying low and selling high. So instead of making the big mistakes that other people are making out there, getting in at the wrong time and getting out at the wrong time, I'm going to show you guys for free, by the way. It's a free webinar. How to buy low, how to sell high. I'll give you all the information about that on the 6th of June, I believe. Thursday, 6th of June. Just go to leadingtrader.com/real. Okay, leadingtrader.com/real.
You'll set that up.
Yeah, I'll set that
people
up.
Can,
And,
okay.
people can register for free for the webinar.
Okay, I'll be there. I'll check it out.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's good stuff.
Yeah,
Risk management.
You're a fan.
I follow his trades on Twitter, and it's good stuff. I mean,
Thanks.
it's basically risk management.
That's right.
That's the key.
That's the key.
That
The
is
key to making money is not to lose money.
That's right. There are two things with wealth I always say. One is to make it, second is to keep it. And most people don't bother to learn the second one. So
Wow, well said. So much
show you.
knowledge here. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. If you're listening to us on iTunes, please subscribe. If you want to see the extremely good-looking Max Keiser, come to us on
I feel like I'm on Hollywood Squares.
Yeah, I
remember
love
that
it.
show? And in the center square.
And you are in the center square. It's London Real TV is our channel on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Thank you to Xbrain who sponsored this episode. If you want to get Alpha Brain,
What about Satoshi? Don't he get a plug?
Satoshi, the mythical Japanese dude who
Satoshi is my Bitcoin gangster.
it sounds like this guy from Iron Man. It's like a Mandarin. Is he like the arch villain?
He's deeper.
He's much deeper.
named a currency, a small bit of a currency after himself. You know, that's
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, thank you to him, and good luck with your bitcoins. And I hope it works and there's an exchange and everything. Anyways,
man. Thanks
Until then,
for- thanks
guys.
for having me on.
Cool. Thank you very much. It's about the journey. Thank you, guys.
Welcome to London.
Successful people.
You say you hate average people.
I hate average. I hate average. I hate average.
And you said good is worse than average,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because it's a
Okay.
facade. I mean, when you think you're getting something, like that's like getting an imitation Louis or imitation Gucci. It looks so much like the real thing.